All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, earlier this week, the shocking news broke that John Calipari was leaving Kentucky as their head basketball coach in favor of less money at Arkansas. Calipari deciding to leave Kentucky for Arkansas was a shocker in itself, but now the Wildcats towards the end of the week are still struggling to find Calipari's replacement in Lexington. Now, Dan Hurley of Connecticut, Nate Oates of Alabama, uh, former Villanova head coach Jay Wright, current Chicago Bulls head coach Billy Donovan, okay, have all turned down Kentucky as they've basically shown or said that they have no interest in the job. And then Scott Drew of Baylor did give it some thought, but at the end of the day, he decided to remain in Waco. So when it's all said and done, where does this leave Kentucky? Or do they now pivot to maybe current BYU head coach Mark Pope? Of course, he was a part of Kentucky's championship team as a player back in 1996. Brad Underwood of Illinois, Bruce Pearl at Auburn, or maybe even Sean Miller at Xavier. I'll tell you like this is an avenue that I'm not sure that Kentucky thought that they were going to go down. And it's one of those, you know what? At the end of the day, sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. Now, have the last 5 years for Calipari at Kentucky been great? No. They've made the NCAA tournament 3 times. Of course, in 2020 there was no tournament due to COVID, and of course the Wildcats did finish that year with a record of 25-6. You're talking about a Kentucky team that finished tied for second in the SEC this past season. But of course, no Final Four appearances since 2015. They have failed to get out of the first round of the NCAA tournament. Pardon me, they have failed to get out of the first weekend, rather, of the NCAA tournament in each of the last 3 years. And at the end of the day, like I said before, you could see the writing on the wall that Calipari and Kentucky were going to part ways. But of course, that buyout, changed things. I've talked about the pressure at Kentucky, and I've talked about the expectations at Kentucky, especially from the fan base there. And it's one of those where you know what, it looks like you guys basically ran off Calipari, which is all fun and good if you want to call it that. But at the end of the day, there's no replacement. And what we're seeing right now, this is clearly not a slam dunk for Kentucky to find their replacement for John Calipari. Dan Hurley is very comfortable at Connecticut right now. He got a boost in pay after leading UConn to the national championship last year. He's going to get another one this year after leading the Huskies to a second consecutive championship. Dan Hurley, at the end of the day, is a Northeastern guy. His family is a Northeastern family. And then on top of that, Dan Hurley wants to come back to that environment in Connecticut. And also, he has an opportunity to possibly make it 3 championships in a row. He's not going to give it up to leave to go to Kentucky because at the end of the day, Dan Hurley, for the rest of his coaching career at Connecticut, is going to be treated like a god for what he has done in the past 2 seasons. Why give that up to chase more money to go do it at Kentucky or try to do it at Kentucky where you haven't had success yet? Okay. Nate Oates at Alabama has decided to stay there. And you look at what he is building for the Crimson Tide program there. And just after getting Alabama to their first Final Four in program history, uh, Nate, it's going to take a lot for Alabama to say, you know what, Nate Oates is no longer our guy. And I think that the alumni there are going to continue to build around him as they're trying to show that they're not just a football school, rather. Like I said the other day, if Jay Wright still wanted to coach college basketball, he'd be doing it at Villanova. There's a reason why Jay Wright left, and I don't think that he's another one who would have wanted to leave his comfort zone at Villanova to go into the pressure cooker that is Kentucky. Billy Donovan, he's already had success in the SEC at Florida. Could he possibly be swayed to come back there? Maybe, but Kentucky is really going to have to break the bank to do it. Scott Drew, he's another guy. He has established himself at Baylor. He's been there for a long time. Led the Bears to a national championship a couple of years ago. And you look at Baylor right now as a program; they're a top 20 program, and it's one of those where I know that when you think about Kentucky basketball, especially into the John Calipari era, you think about, them bringing in five McDonald's All Americans every single year. Clearly, that's about to change because we've already seen some of those young men decommit, and they're probably going to follow John Calipari to Arkansas. But my question is Kentucky the job that it once was? And I'm going to say no for a variety of reasons. Yes, Kentucky is still a premier basketball program, but you hear the stories about Kentucky's facilities basketball wise in comparison to other schools. It's not the same. Then on top of that, the playing surface, if you will, has balanced out more. Okay, everybody really has a seat at the table, trying to get to that national championship level. So it's one of those. I mean, you just look at the SEC alone; it is no longer, Kentucky's exclusive province. You've got Auburn with Bruce Pearl. You've got Alabama with Nate Oates. Florida, is getting back there. Texas A&M, so many others. Tennessee and Rick Barnes, and I can go right down the list as far as the programs in the SEC. The landscape has changed. And at the end of the day, like I said the other night, it's all about pressure. There's pressure to win, but then there's Kentucky pressure. And we know about the expectations in Lexington for this school. It's Final Four or bust. And honestly, what we're seeing right now, we're not seeing a lot of head coaches out there, lining up to get into that mix. It took Brad Underwood some time to get his program established at Illinois. If, for the sake of argument, that Brad Underwood wanted to come to Kentucky, would the folks there be patient enough with him to get that going? Bruce Pearl, it took him some time to get things going at Tennessee, and then the same thing at Auburn. Would the folks there be patient with him? And you figure, in all of Bruce Pearl's time at Auburn, the Tigers only have one Final Four appearance, and I say only because his Final Four appearance, in my opinion, at Auburn carries a lot more weight than it would if we're talking about Bruce Pearl at Kentucky. That one Final Four appearance might still have him on the hot seat in Lexington. Sean Miller, who was let go by Arizona, came back to Xavier. It still took him time to establish things in Tucson. He's trying to get things established at Xavier as well. Sean Miller is a head coach, never has never gotten to a Final Four. How would that carry over at Kentucky? The bottom line is it wouldn't. So Kentucky is going to find somebody to lead their program. We know that. But at the end of the day, I think the powers that be there, they're gonna have to check their egos at the door because it's still a premier job. Yes, it's still a premier program because of the name on the front of the jersey, but it's not as enticing. It's kind of like Notre Dame football. When you think about the Notre Dame brand, it carries a lot of weight, but it's still not the same job that it once was. And of course, the folks in Lexington do not want to hear that. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. So clearly, the search for the new head man for this historic basketball program is taking longer than the folks in Lexington would like it to be. Kentucky's going to they're going to find somebody. There's no ifs ands or buts about it. But clearly, it's taking longer than expected. Who's going to step up to the plate and be that guy to lead this Kentucky program? We got to wait and see. But at the end of the day, like I said before, whoever it is, they have to realize that they're jumping into the pressure cooker. Yes, you will be paid handsomely, to be in the bluegrass state. But at the end of the day, that pressure does come with a price. And if you can't produce, you know what? It's going to be out the door very quickly. The expectations are a little bit different at Kentucky. There's no rebuilding process there. There's reloading, and that's what the expectations are. But like I said, the SEC is no longer the exclusive province basketball wise of Kentucky. The NCAA tournament and getting to the Final Four is no longer the exclusive province of Kentucky. Things have changed in college basketball. Things will continue to change in college basketball. And if Kentucky does not practice patience with their next head coaching hire, it could really, and I mean really, set back their program, because the last thing that you want to do is to have a consistent starting over cycle as far as head coaches, and a lot of that can come down to having patience or a lack thereof. So, what is Kentucky going to do with their next head coach? We got to wait and see. Clearly, they're swinging and missing so far, but eventually they're going to be able to put some wood on the bat and find their guy. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Now, I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.